has been around for centuries. The drum is one instrument that can be traced back to ancient times, from early rituals to celebrations today. It's fair to say that drums have captured the beat of human history. Today, some people are using the drum as a form of therapy, as they carry traditions across continents and centuries.
Liverpool holds a unique place in music history. It was home to John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. But long before the Beatles, it was known as an important part of the Industrial Revolution. Liverpool is an international melting pot today, but during the Second World War, it was targeted and heavily bombed. It turned to immigrants from former Caribbean colonies to rebuild the shelled-out city.
So this centre has been here since the 1970s. It was gifted to the Caribbean or West Indian community and brought together by 6 Caribbean islands who wanted to form a solid base for the Caribbean immigrants, particularly the Windrush generation who came here after the war to help rebuild the country. They were invited over as British citizens, and this was a space for them to be, and the centre thrived for many decades really. It was a space that people had parties and dances, celebrations, the funerals, people met their partners here. A lot of people have positive memories and experiences and life events tied to this centre. And it was the heart of the community, the heart of the Liverpool 8 community and the black community as well. And it's the last bastion of that community really. All of the other centres and kind of organisations have pretty much fallen by the wayside really, certainly the buildings have, but this one's still standing. It did fall into disuse in the 2010s and was empty and homeless people sleeping in it and wasn't being used. But then a developer came around in 2019 and wanted to develop on the land, and there was a protest movement to stop that and to bring the centre back into the community. Today we're currently installing a new PA system at the centre, which is to allow us to continue to put on DJs and potentially even bands and open mic nights eventually. So again, it's just part of that process of revitalising the centre, developing it and taking it forward. Just revitalising the centre by bringing in.
Alan Crawford is on the board of the local Caribbean Center. He's a counselor and psychotherapist during the day, but he's a musician at night. He's trying to revitalize the center. On this day, he'll lead community members in a musical group therapy ritual.
So Ubuntu is an African word that can be translated as I am because we are. And what this concept is trying to point out is something that, in traditional African society and indigenous cultures around the world is understood but seems to have been forgotten to a large extent here in the West. And that is that we are not separate, isolated individuals, but actually we are all, without sounding too much like a hippie, we're all one. We're all connected, we're interdependent, we rely upon each other. We don't exist in isolation. And actually, my own belief is that a lot of our emotional suffering today is because we're trying to live our lives as separate individuals rather than as communities. Human beings are social animals. We evolved to live in tribes and communities. And we live in the age of isolation. We live in an age where people do feel alone with their struggles, raising their children, going to work. Ubuntu is about offering a safe space for people to come together, to be together, and to have that sense of I'm not alone. I belong here, I'm part of something. I don't need to go through these struggles alone. Pouring libation is an ancient African practice. It's considered the oldest form of prayer. And you simply pour out some water onto the ground with intention, with intentionality, with mindfulness. And as you do that, you are making an offering to the earth, to the ancestors, and saying some words of prayer or affirmation. And it's a practice that, still exists in African Caribbean communities in parts of the world, certainly in the Caribbean and even in African American culture. You know, when you hear people say, you know, pour one out for the homies, that's exactly what they're doing. This roots back to ancient African practices.
If you're okay with it, go down, reach, but you have to give in, let go.
We're coming together because we want to be together and support each other. Not everyone can afford to go and pay whatever per hour for therapy sessions. Not everyone can afford to wait 6 months, 12 months, 18 months on a waiting list to get mental health services through the NHS. So this provides a really vital service. It fills a gap, a need in the community for free support that can be accessed immediately.
This is a perfect blend for Alan, mixing music, mental well-being, and a sense of community all together. Alan believes he's tapping into a form of therapy that's been around since the dawn of time.
As well as being a therapist, I'm also a musician, and for me, one of the great things about Ubuntu is bringing the two of those things together for me in a really holistic way. You know, we have the drumming and sometimes singing, maybe sometimes incorporating dance even in future is something we're looking at. Combining that with the therapeutic aspect is something that really allows me to connect with both those passions and offer something that's useful to the community. One of the really powerful things about music is that it can give expression to something that we can't always put into words. You know, music can, whether we're making music ourselves or even just connecting with music that other people are making, it can allow us to express, release emotions that we might not otherwise get to release or express. It can be really cathartic as an experience, and I believe that that's a really important aspect of healing. We need to feel it before we can heal it. We need to release those emotions in order that we can then have that release of energy and then process that and then ultimately move on with our lives into more positive, healthy directions. But that releasing aspect, that cathartic aspect is really important. And with drumming particularly, it speaks to something quite primitive, quite kind of innate in us. It speaks to, you know, the earliest humans. You know, it goes back to the beginnings of time, really, when humans first started to form in communities and tribes. You know, there was drumming and ceremonies that involved drumming.
Anna Slater believes efforts like these will restore the center to its former glory.
I've lived in this area since 1984, and I used to come to dances here, you know, like club nights, dance hall, regularly. There used to be a number of different locations in the community where we had our own nightlife, basically, quite separate to the city centre. It was very much part of the black community, and it was always there for hosting different events. A number of my family have had their funeral here. You know, the party afterwards, the coming together, the social aspect has been held here. So it's been this community centre has been a part of my life since 1984.
An active member of the community, she's here to take part in the Ubuntu Healing Circle.
And there's just something about coming together as a group and recognising that it's a safe space allows people to talk about issues that they perhaps find difficult to talk about outside, you know. Not everyone's got the kind of support network that allows them to express emotional problems or perhaps mental health issues. We don't advertise in terms of mental health, we talk about well-being, but at Ubuntu, which is the name of the group, we recognise that well-being really reflects mental, emotional, physical and spiritual. And we don't separate that. It's only really in the West that these things have been so separated out. In other cultures, it's very much recognised that you have to take care of all of yourself, mind, body and soul holistically, and we're trying to bring that into the community.
It's completely free of charge and it's focused on drawing inspiration from Africa and from indigenous cultures rather than looking to the Western biomedical approach to mental health. It's looking really rather than what's wrong with us, but what's right with us and how can we access that, how can we access our own power. speaks to something quite ancient and quite deep within us. And particularly I think for people of colour communities, whether it's African, Caribbean or other indigenous communities, you know, in our ancestry there is that very direct link to the sound of those drums, the feel of those drums, the vibration. You can feel it in your chest. It kind of induces almost a different state of awareness. And what I've noticed is it seems to loosen us up and connect us more to ourselves and our bodies, so that when we then go into the talking circle where people open up about what's going on for them, people are already more open, people are already more in touch with what they want to say and what they feel.